Hey everyone, welcome to the UFO Hub live stream. So today I have a very special guest here in person, sitting right across from me. Hey
Hello.
Nathan, how are you?
Good. How are you, Anand? Thank you for having me on the show.
Today's show is pretty much going to be about psychedelics, and I want to cover as much as I possibly can with these two friends of mine. The other one is on Telegram right now. I'll introduce him in a minute. But the whole point of the show is to basically give you a perspective and as much detail as you possibly can what different experiences on different things have done for us individually. And on some occasion, I don't know if they specifically remember it, but also collectively while we were, I guess, on these certain journeys together. So there's certain things I want to tell you right now that what we want to cover so that you're not guessing of what we will eventually go through. So at one point or another, we're going to go through salvia, DMT, weed, Hawaiian baby woodrow seeds, LSD, and what was the other ayahuasca? There you go, and
Psilocybin.
and psilocybin mushrooms, right? And so, and then besides that, basically want to cover stigma of the psychedelics. Basically, experiences differ from person to person? What are the general lessons to be applied? And will you always see beings during these certain journeys? Are they different dimension or hallucinations, basically the things that are being experienced? And so you'll kind of hear different points of views from each one of us. And then is it always a positive or negative experience? So let me see here. Rick, say hello, please. Welcome. I'm glad you were able to join us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Awesome. Well, so Rick, I figured since I already shifted on you, just please tell me just a little bit about you and maybe just a connection between you and I, if you can keep it short, and then I'll shift over to Nathan.
Sure, yeah. So right now I work as an online English teacher. I teach English to children in China, and that's given me an opportunity to live abroad. I've always loved living in other countries where they don't speak the same language I do. I fell in love with like Colombia and South America when I traveled to Peru to do ayahuasca. And I ended up loving Colombia. So I stayed in Colombia for I went back and forth between there for the last couple of years. So I got done living there in the last year and a half. And I've been able to work and live there doing that. And then, of course, I met Adnan, I guess, towards the end of my college years. And we became really good friends, over, just everything we talked about and began our psychedelic journeys together. So that's where this all begins, pretty much.
Let's be short, simple. So, Nathan, please introduce yourself and kind of make a connection to how you and I know each other.
Hello, I'm Nathan Buscher. I work in IT. I'm a small business owner. I've met Anand actually at a Johnny Appleseed project, if anybody's familiar with that. And since then, we immediately hit it off. We knew we had a lot of things in common. And and I do have some experience with psychedelics, and I'd like to share them with everybody.
All right. So basically, let's, I guess, figure it out. Instead of us going into the details about each one for right now, I want to start out with basically the first thing, which was the stigma of psychedelics. So generally, I found when it comes to, psychedelics, that people somehow create this hierarchy of validation. So only if you were awake, only if you were not drunk, only if you saw it and heard it with your own eyes and ears, or smelled it or tasted it on occasion, only then is it a valid experience, and then everything else below that, it's pretty much lessened, and it depends on how far down the line you go, with alcohol and other inhabitants or inhibitants. Yeah, it's the word I'm looking for. Only then is it basically then sort of like, yeah, well, it's you could have hallucinated. It's not just, it's basically the stigma of it is that somehow it's not valid. And so that's what I wanted to approach. What would you say about that.
Yes, yes, and basically, yeah, I agreed. Originally, when you mentioned that topic, I thought you meant more the stigma of its legality, its if it's safe or not. Um, but you're absolutely right. Is it quantifiable? I understand what you're saying, and they want, you talk to people like MUFON, who they want to be able to measure it, they want to be able to taste it, they want to be able to use their gizmos and their gadgets to, produce recordable results. But you know what? Is it real to the person, the experiencer? Is that and my point that I made that is, I think it's valid if your takeaway is valid. What did you learn from the experience, whether positive or negative? If you learn something, if you can take something away from that experience, then who's to say it's not valid? Who's to say what you experienced isn't your conscious, like in your consciousness? Yes, it's real. So, but I do agree there is a stigma there.
Rick, any thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a good reason why there's a stigma behind it. I mean, it's also scary because I think a lot of people that have never done it before, I mean, it's made fun of too. I mean, for example, mushrooms are made to look very scary. Like I remember seeing something on what was it? I think it was like Family Guy, where like the kid eats mushrooms and then like sees a bunch of like crazy scary things, people are getting killed and stuff, so like these things have also been portrayed in the media as being bad, very, very bad, kind of like the movie Reefer Madness and what it did with marijuana, but the truth is, like, because most people have experience with either drinking alcohol or smoking weed, like they associate their experiences with those things with like mushrooms, for example. So they just see these things like, oh, bro, I saw like dragons and stuff. And that's what people think, until like I had my first, mushroom trip, and it was like nothing like that at all. Nowhere even close to being like that. But it is going into a psychedelic experience. Like my first one was, it was salvia. It can be very unnerving because you feel like sensations and see things in your reality gets bent. Nothing like what you would experience with alcohol, or I don't even think with marijuana necessarily. So the stigma, I think there's a good reason for why there's a stigma. But when it comes to like, are you experiencing something real or not? Are you experiencing a hallucination? Like in my personal experience, there were a lot of things I felt like I was just made more aware of. That was like the crazy thing, was the obvious shift I felt in my perception. But I never actually felt like the perception I had was like necessarily something foreign. It was always like, I feel like I've always known this, but like I wasn't like as aware of it during my waking life. That maybe there's certain barriers and things that are being brought down, at least like through mushrooms. And when I started reading scientifically why that might actually be the case, there's science to prove that it's possible that psilocybin actually reduces activity in parts of the brain and allows other parts of your brain that are less dominant to be active. So that in itself kind of explains scientifically why somebody might feel like they have a valid experience or a different takeaway than what they had before they took the substance itself.
All right, thank you, Rick. So that was Rick. For those of you who just kind of tuning in, this is us basically kind of being plopped into a whole new stream. I had an original stream scheduled. We started out with the title and everything, and we did introductions, and then we were very badly off sync. And by me trying to restart it or reset it, it basically disconnected there. And when I started a new stream, it started on a new video. So we had just started, so you haven't, basically you haven't missed anything. But basically today was supposed to be our psychedelics. And I have all three of my good friends with me today. One obviously over Telegram, Nathan, on sitting right across from me, and also very first time in person in the studio that I have actually somebody who I can talk to. So we wanted to just cover these different aspects of psychedelics and try to give you as much detail as possible about them. This is, and I had a disclaimer earlier when we first started out, so I have to say it verbally. Please check your local and federal and state laws. Do not try this at home, and basically be responsible. So this is just us telling you a story. This is not to encourage you. This is just simply the experiences and how these different I guess, journeys have shaped our lives. So I'm just kind of putting it down in a nutshell for you to about before we continue on what this is about. So anyway, just want to give you a little context and background information. So the next thing that I want to cover, and I had it all ready as well on my little paper here. So we're talking about the stigma. That was the main part, but we're also going to go into some of the other stuff. So we're talking about different experiences. So at one point or another, we were all together in a room, and we had, I want to say, some collective experiences. I don't know if you guys were aware of it, or whatever. We might get into that. But generally, I find that different experiences differ for different people, because it's kind of like tuned to you about what it is going on with you, what's going on in your life. That's just my perception from this. So what do you think, Nathan?
The collective experiences, or just
no, just about does it differ from person to person?
It's absolutely personal. There's no denying it. Psychedelics, even weed, if you're open to it. A lot of people smoke weed and they sort of shut off. I smoke weed and it activates me, like it turns on my thinking capabilities, like amplifies them. But with psychedelics, it's very personal. It's usually, and then I have to assume, because of the way Hollywood portrays it, and then there's also a lot of people out there trying to abuse these things, but I personally don't see how it's possible to abuse psychedelics, like just to use them for fun. But maybe that's because I'm a spiritual seeker, just from the start. So whenever I take psychedelics, it's always it's a learning experience. It's very personal. I mean, because I guess a lot of it's in your head, and there's no hidden corners or hidden depths that are untouchable. And I usually come out of it learning a lot. And like I said, let's go back to that disclaimer. We're not condoning the use of psychedelics. I'm definitely not like advocating it or saying everybody has to do it. I'm just saying there were experiences that helped me immensely. And actually, I don't use them anymore. I've come full circle. I don't use any drugs anymore. Oh, wait a minute. If you consider weed a drug, okay, I do smoke a little weed from time to time, but it's very personal experience, and it can be rewarding. I don't think it's time. We're going to have another topic here where we went into some personal experiences. Right?
We will eventually.
Okay,
this is just to cover these basics first.
Gotcha. Okay, well, yeah. So yes, I agree. It's very very personal.
Rick, what do you think?
I mean, like, did we share? Like, do you think like we were interconnected or something during an experience we had?
Well, I mean, basically, would you agree with the premise that most of the time it will differ from person to person?
Absolutely. I mean, and especially during an ayahuasca ceremony, at least a good healing center, they're very respectful of that. They recognize that you shouldn't have too many people in one group, because there's ayahuasca centers that run groups of like hundreds of people. But if you're in a good ayahuasca center, the person who runs it, is they're very respective of everybody's space. So nobody is to enter anybody's space during an ayahuasca experience if there's 6 to 12 people, because people have their own past, their own experiences, and they go through different things. So like, while one person might have a really good experience where everything's just, full of love and they just want to get up and dance, there might be somebody else who's crying, or another person who's throwing up. And all of this comes from, their past or current situations they're experiencing. I mean, it's just like life. Everybody's on their own journey. So they're going to have their own journey during a psychedelic experience as well.
Right. Well, Nathan, I don't know. I don't want to keep jumping around, but I wanted to. I lost my little thingy list here. So basically, I don't want to jump immediately into beings, but this place that you found yourself to be going, what would you think that is? Is it a different dimension, or is it just an hallucination as everyone else would describe it?
I guess how I answer that question depends on what you took and how much you took. Like, because if you just eat a little bit of mushrooms, it can be very spiritually rewarding, but I don't feel like you ever leave this place. It just alters your consciousness enough that you can perceive things that may not have been unaware to you. Now, if you eat a boatload, which I've never done on mushrooms, but I know Anand has, but like other drugs like DMT or salvia, it doesn't seem like, I don't know, it doesn't seem to matter how little you do, you're transported to another place, very briefly, but you are transported. What other? And then there's some, I actually did a couple that you guys haven't done, which I would not recommend, that were, LSD, I guess for me, usually there's always a period of time where you seem like you feel like you've lost complete touch with this reality and you're experiencing another reality, but it's nothing like Hollywood, that's for sure. Nothing like the cartoons portray. We're not Homer Simpson in the desert on peyote buttons. But so, what did that answer your question, or what exactly?
No, that was it. Just we're not going into details right now. We're just simply basically. There you go, get it back on me. We just wanted to cover these main points to kind of go through them first, and then once we get them covered, then we can go into the individual psychedelic and individual trips and lessons learned from that. So, Rick, I wanted to ask you next, basically. So, would you say it's a different dimension, or is it just a hallucination? What is your thought on that?
I don't know I don't know if I can really answer that. Like, is it just a hallucination? I mean, I would say that it's not. I also want to say, was I going anywhere? I mean, I think actually during a psychedelic experience, like the big question becomes like, who are you? Like, because there's always a concept of you. And like, I had experiences, where I felt like maybe I personally went somewhere else, but like my body was still here, So like the question becomes, who are you? So I don't know. I mean, I think the same question could be, you could almost apply the same question to what happens when you die. I don't know if you go to the same place when you die as if you go to a place like where I went on salvia, but I can definitely tell you that on my salvia trip, which was the first one I had, I was not seeing what my eyes were seeing here. So I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Right. Well, so while I didn't, have you basically, talking, let's move on to the next point here. So how would you generally rate your experiences? Positive, negative, bit of both? What would you say?
I could start. Like, I have positive or negative. I've had both. I've had both. I mean, I guess I could say at the end of it, even a negative experience is actually a positive one, because there's things that you learn about the negative experience that you had. You usually find that, there was a reason I experienced that. But that's the thing. I mean, I think it's also depends on like why you're approaching it. Like, I feel like you really need to understand psychedelics, like, or at least understand as much as you can about them before you even attempt. Like, if you were to even consider doing something like that, you need to understand, like, it's not a walk in the park. Like the guy at the ayahuasca center said that during our meeting. He's like, so, if you came here thinking that you were, going to have a party or this was going to be something fun, you're in for a big freaking surprise. And he's absolutely right about that. It's not a walk in the park. And like Nathan said, it's for learning. So, just like you have some teachers that are really, really mean to you sometimes, that's what an experience can be like too. It can be mean to you. And so you have to be prepared for that and be in an environment where you're safe to handle that. That's what I would say.
And so, Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I agree with what Rick said 100%. Yeah. I mean, you can have what you perceive as both negative and positive experiences on the same, in the same experience, in the same trip, on the same substance. It can go back and forth several times. And sometimes it can be absolutely terrifying, but yeah, Rick is right. Like usually when you're right in the middle of it, it's the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced. And then you realize later that it's like, okay, well now I realize I'm really grateful for having seen that, experienced it, whatever the feelings, the emotions, because sometimes on certain substances, it's just the emotion, the feeling is so intense and you don't actually see anything, or if you do, it's secondary to the feeling of it. So yeah, I agree. It's both positive and negative. And though I'm not condoning drug use, I'd say overall, it's the takeaway that I've taken from it has been rewarding to my life. Like the decisions that I've been able to make due to the things that were experienced on psychedelics have been valuable to me.
Okay. So I guess let's get into the part that you both keep itching to get into. And so I figured everyone else would, want to hear it. So one of my very first experiences was with, I don't know that Nathan was there, but Rick, I believe you were there. And we were, what was that again? I keep forgetting it.
Salvia divinorum.
Thank you,
It's
salvia.
actually a sage plant.
Okay. Well, anyway, so let's discuss some details so people know what we're talking about. What happened? So Nathan, I don't think was there, but Rick was. So maybe just Rick and I can discuss it. Obviously before that, I had no idea of any kind. I was just straight laced. Let's just do everything by the book. That was it. That was my life. When I first took it in, the first thing that happened was that I immediately was, basically still here, but my mind was all of a sudden seeing everything like a projection or a picture. That, the furthest away and the closest thing was all on the same plane. And so, yes, you could say, oh, your eyes, you somehow something happened to your eyes and you didn't have depth perception. But my experience at that time was that I wasn't seeing with my eyes, and it was more like seeing with something more than just, even though my eyes were open, I had the experience, you could, there was like kind of like the first splash into the ocean of that psychedelics are, to just kind of like, what in the world is this? It was a bit unnerving because we're so used to about, seeing things and interacting with stuff, when all of that kind of falls aside and it's all almost like a holograph around you. It was unnerving, but I can't emphasize this enough. And I did it kind of intuitively. I just calmed down. Instead of freaking out on what in the world is happening, I just calmed down and observed it for what it was, And so, as subtle and quick as that was, I basically just kind of got me my first taste of like, wow, there's really a whole new world out there that I wasn't aware of. Maybe some people are aware of out there, but it was the first time for me, And after that, it became more intriguing. Not like, oh, let's do drugs all the time. It wasn't it at all. It was like a specific lessons were moving forward from then on. Specific lessons were learned, but I won't want to get into it that far for now. So that was my first experience ever regarding that. So Nathan, I don't know that you had that specific experience. So while we're still on salvia, I want to ask Rick about it. So Rick, what can you tell me a little bit about yours, please?
Yeah, well, once it was the first time I ever did any kind of psychedelic, and salvia is debatedly one of the most potent psychedelics known. So what a great thing to start with, right? I was really in for a surprise. But what really blew my mind was that all of a sudden, like I was really complaining because I wasn't getting anything. Like you have to like when we were smoking it, so you have to hold it in your lungs for a long time. So I remember Adnan's like, "Oh, I'm here again. I'm gone. I'm not here. I'm gone. I'm not." And I was like, I really want that experience. So I sucked this stuff and I held it in for like 30 seconds and I blew it out. And like, I was like starting to wonder, like, maybe this whole psychedelic thing is just a big, like joke. So I remember like, I tried like these like dream herbs that didn't help me with dreaming. So I'm sitting there like, this is ridiculous. I don't think psychedelics even do anything. People are just making this stuff up. And while I'm like, going on and on and on, I start noticing that the fire in front of me is starting to move. And I felt like there was a hand pushing my consciousness out of my skull. And all of a sudden I was like, oh no. And that's when I was like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. And it was like a train that was starting to go full speed down a hill. And I wanted to get off of it, but there was no getting off of it. And I was like, here you go. You wanted it. Here you go. And I remember like everything, like all of a sudden, everything I was seeing like started to zoom out and became two-dimensional. And I felt like I was standing in a room and everything I was looking at was a picture on a wall. And I was like, my life is a picture on a wall? And like, there was a voice that came over to like, yeah, have you forgotten everything? This whole time you've been trying to practice doing astral projection and leave your mind. And all you ever had to do was look up. And I looked up and the whole scene changed. And I was like, I saw this big Ferris wheel like emerge out of the ground. And I remember seeing this Ferris wheel, like being encouraged to get on the Ferris wheel. I'm like, I'm not getting on that thing. And the voice said, too late, you're already on it. And I got buckled in this thing. I was like, oh my God. That was like, and it launched me. It started spinning really fast and it launched me like into the sky. And like, I started feeling like I was waking up in like different lifetimes. And I remember like, even like, I was like, eventually I was floating what looked like some kind of like interconnected, like nervous system. Like there were nerves, but they're like colors. And there were also like these visors, like I could put my face on them. And I felt like I was like my real, like my, I don't know, maybe my ethereal self floating around. And the voice is like showing me like all these different visors. And it's telling me like, you know, look at all these visors. See, these are all the different possible lifetimes you could live and experience if you choose to. And I was like, well, I don't want to experience those. I need to go back to the one that I was experiencing. And eventually I went through some time warp, and I felt like I was laying on like a table, and there were like 3 or 4 like children like standing over me, and I felt like they knew me and I know who they were, and they were kind of like laughing at me. And I was like kind of getting irritated because I'm like, you know, who are these children laughing at me? Like they've been watching me live this life on this like planet, and they're just sitting here laughing at me. Like they don't even have the courage to like do what I've been doing. Like why am I here? And like this voice said, like, have you forgotten everything? You've been asleep for 26 years. And I was 26 years old at the time. And I was like, well, I want to go back to sleep because I don't want to wake up in front of them while they're laughing. Send me back. I have stuff to do. And so eventually I said like, very well. And it flushed me through. And I remember like flying through a time warp, and I'm like trying to remember like who I was, like, who was I? Where was I? What was I like? And all of a sudden, like I hear Adnan's voice, Rick, are you okay? And I started kind of coming out of it. I'm like, I'm almost back. Hold on. I'm almost back. And everything stopped for a minute. And it said, hey, you're 12 years old. You just fell off your bike and hit your head on the common ground, which is like this little piece of land in our neighborhood, which is a true thing. I did. I flew off my bike and hit my head. And it said, you just forgot where you were. I was like, oh, and I go, Sean, who's my friend I was riding bikes with. And I hear Adnan go, Sean. And all of a sudden everything swooped back, and there's Adnan. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, Adnan? And that was the end of the experience. That was nuts. That was my first experience.
All right. So Nathan, although you weren't there during this particular time, so what was your first time experience with?
So my first experience was mushrooms. It wasn't anything like Rick just explained. It was much more subtle. Mushrooms are much more subtle. They kind of pick you up slowly. You know, you have your experience, and then they let you down slowly. It's very almost like a nurturing mother of psychedelics. And I think I was only like 13 or 14 at the time. I started very young, just wanting to have experiences. And back then I was just wanting to have fun. And I think we were trying to find some weed, and we were in Boulder, Colorado. It's a college town. And we went to the place where all the college kids hang out, and it was supposedly very easy to find weed there. And all we could find was mushrooms. It was almost like ordained but that experience actually, it was just kind of like, maybe it helped me just not be afraid of these things at an early age. And, it was just, you know, things on the wall moved like if the wallpaper, it was a lot like if you'd seen that movie with Johnny Depp, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, when he's on mushrooms in the casino, and things start growing up the walls and growing on people. It was very visual like that. And I think my friend might have been having a bad experience. I just realized that right now, because he locked himself in his room in his basement, and I kept going down there just saying, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are you experiencing this? This is incredible. This is so different. And he was just like hiding under his blanket and stuff. I wish I would have realized what was going on, that I could have consoled him, but I was so involved in my own experience, which was fantastic, actually, not to condone the drug use, but it was just a very, it was a very stereotypical psychedelic experience. I think it wasn't earth shattering. It was just kind of a lot of visuals, very giggly. And it just made me kind of, I guess, not afraid of them, which I guess is a good or a bad thing, because since then I did it several more times.
Okay, so basically that was salvia for me for the first time, salvia for Rick, and then psilocybin mushrooms. So I guess what was the second one? I believe was then the DMT. And I think all three of us were there during that time. And so, what was that? So I think I just basically, it was just us three. There was no one else there.
Well, I think actually I've only had one notable psychedelic experience between that first experience and when I did those when I was with you guys and we were roughly 26, I guess,
Right.
26, 27, something like that. So otherwise, I think I did acid a couple times with friends, and you always get to that point where Rick just said you're kind of strapped onto a roller coaster and you kind of sort of say, oh my God, I didn't want this. This isn't what I wanted. I regret taking that, and it's too late. But they are good experiences, you know, and then maybe mushrooms once again. And I remember...
right, but I wanted to cover just DMT for now.
Sure.
We're just going down the list, you know, not of all that you've done, just specifically DMT and all the experiences that had happened. But because we were all three there, I wanted to basically kind of get that covered. So I believe, like, I don't know why, like, not that I don't know what I was thinking, just maybe I was selfish in some way, but I would always make sure that there was food, you know, then, you know, there was just kind of like, okay, maybe if we're going to go outside, let's make a fire, getting that whole setup, you know, because I knew that's what would make me feel comfortable. So I don't know if you guys would agree with that process, but just tell me a little bit, just the setup from your point of view.
Yeah, I definitely actually took note of your set and setting that you provided us. And I really appreciate that. You know, you were living in Missouri at the time, a very secluded place, and you provided a very comfortable set and setting. Set and setting, I think, is something that Timothy Leary came up with, one of the pioneers of psychedelic research. The mainstream media, I don't know if he was cuckoo or not, but the mainstream media ended up making him the poster child of why not to do psychedelics. But anyway, yeah, Anand had provided an environment for us that felt very comfortable, and that is very important. And I do remember appreciating that you had taken time to do that for us.
Well, but there's a reason why I'm bringing that up. So did that have an influence of your experience, it being set up in a more comfortable environment as opposed to it, like, let's say, being in a club where it's noisy and everyone around you that you don't know, and then all of a sudden you go crazy? Just talk about that part, because I want to set that up also for people, just so that they understand. Like I said, we're going to go into depth of this, so every little bit of process, whatever we went through to kind of take everyone else on the journey with us.
So I'm trying to remember the different, because we did the DMT, and then shortly after we did mushrooms at your house, sort of in the similar set and setting. But whenever you're going to go into this experience, you want to make sure the people are right, the energy's right, and there's, I don't know, nothing terrifying around, you know, like, that was very helpful that you did that. So wait, what exactly are you asking me then? Like, I don't understand.
No,
yes, it was helpful.
Just talking about the setup before. Yeah, we'll get into the trip itself. I'm just talking about the setup, because I don't think some have considered that. You know, just to be at a peaceful place, to be, you know, among people you trust, you know, and things like that. That's what I'm talking about. Rick, what about you? Do you find that that's also very important, or does it not matter?
No, I think it's very important that your environment is comfortable, because especially since, you know, if it's something that you're doing for the first time, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So it's very important to not just have a comfortable environment, but to be with people you trust and love. And a lot of times it ends up making the experience a lot better. It like strengthens your relationship, I feel, with the people that you're with. Because, you know, just like if you traveled to a foreign country with somebody, you know, it's the kind of same, like, there's a reason we call it a trip. You know, it's a mental trip, and you learn a lot from it. So yeah, I think it's very important.
So Nathan, based on your experience, what did you, when I believe we were outside during that time, and sort of like around the fire, kind of trying to keep it very shamanic like, what was your experience on DMT?
So I don't think we smoked it right. We didn't smoke, so it wasn't like a full experience that could be gained. But I remember we had used a little, like because we knew you couldn't just burn it straight into a pipe. So I think we like sprinkled it over tobacco. Am I remembering that correctly? Like, because you're supposed to freebase it. We learned later on. Like, I
don't think tobacco was involved, based on my memory. I don't think.
Well, I know. I think it was our very first attempt, and I don't think we smoked it exactly correct, but it definitely worked. I remember you had like a bong type thing, and you took the first hit
It
next
was
to
a
me.
paperweight.
It was a paperweight? Yeah, a paperweight, of
That's
course.
what I
I'm
was
sorry.
told at the
Yes,
shop.
yes,
I was
yes.
like, "Can I have?" They're
Paperweight.
like, "You mean the paperweight,
Yeah,
sir?"
of course.
Like, "Oh yeah, the paperweight."
Absolutely. Yeah, how things have lightened up nowadays. Now you go into stores and they'll talk about anything. They don't kick you out for using the word bong. But anyway, yeah, you had taken the first hit and you were sitting to my right. I do remember that. And you could tell it had an immediate effect because you immediately got silent. And then I took it from you, added mine, because we each had it measured out. We each had the precise amount measured out. We used a super precise scale. We wanted to be as scientific about it as we could, but also, be explorers. And I took my hit, and I remember the hum was like the first thing that I felt, and it just got louder and louder and louder until, but I don't, oh, I do. Oh man. Wow. I'm sorry. Okay. It was, okay. I guess we did it right. We did enough. Cause, I remember like reaching a point where I felt the hum, and then I saw like my entire vision was like lots of like, undulating shapes, but perfectly symmetrical. Like, I don't know, like you take a small snowflake and just expand it over my entire vision and add a bazillion colors. And it all seemed like it had a reason. Like it wasn't just madness of shapes and colors. It all was very, very intricately designed with edges and shapes. And then I remembered from reading the book DMT, A Spirit Molecule, he would always ask the question or tell his researchers this is a book by Rick Strassman, for a little background, who he was the very first scientist researcher to be able to officially do research with psychedelics again since they outlawed them in the 60s. Or since they, outlawed them. They made them Schedule I. They were supposedly not supposed to be used for any purpose, even medicinal. He's the first one, and he would instruct his patients is when they got, and then once I got to this thing, and for a while there, I was lost in its beauty. Just all this very like intricate geometrical shapes undulating and interlocking amongst each other, and it wasn't chaotic. It was perfect. It was perfect. It was beautiful. I could have stared at it for hours. But then I remember, like in the back of my mind, I remember he would instruct his patients, if you see that, try to poke through and see what's on the other side. So then I was like, okay. So then I just sort of mentally willed myself through this vision of I don't want to call it like a sheet. Like it was that's the only way I can say it, but it wasn't a sheet because it was everywhere, and it was, but anyway, so I get to it and I poke myself through, and then there was this other shape with all these things spinning all around it. And I just sort of knew, oh, man, I wish you would have done this interview when we were 28. So I remember knowing.
I tried. You guys don't remember, but I tried.
Okay.
You guys chickened out.
Maybe we had to have more experiences, be older, be more mature to be able to talk about it publicly. And I just remember knowing I knew what this was. I knew it was important. And I don't want to say that it was like cosmic consciousness, or it definitely wasn't God. I knew it wasn't God, but I knew it was very intelligent, and I could ask it anything or I could not. I could just enjoy its presence. And that was pretty much it. And then that was like that. And once I experienced being with this for a while, and I think it's almost as soon as I realized, oh, this is what this is. Like, of course, duh, I remember this. It was matter of fact. And then it kind of settled down, but then it kind of stays with you a while. Like, although the whole real experience is over in 15 minutes, there's a very calm sense of peace that stays with you. Kind of the energy's light and buzzing. And I remember the trees were moving and waving and almost like communicating with us. And there was like entities in the trees, and I don't know if they were animals or spirits or whatever, but they were definitely watching us and anticipating and sort of eager with us. Like the excitement it was together. We felt very together, and like everybody was excited that we were experiencing this together. And it was a sort of a sense of oneness at that point. And that's sort of, and we didn't smoke it twice that night, did we? We just did it the one time.
Yeah.
Okay. But that sort of stayed with us. That was the mood that stayed with us, just lesser and lesser and lesser throughout the night. Yeah. And it was very, very peaceful, very, there was that moment of that buzzing that was like, oh crap, strap in. But it was, I didn't need to fear it at all, at least that one, and it was nice.
So, Rick, what about you?
With the DMT, so like I didn't actually feel like I broke through like a lot of people say, like, where they go and some people feel like they go into like a place where they just see all these geometric shapes. I felt like I kind of like was in between that experience, and like I would actually classify it as more of like a highly intensified mushroom experience, because like salvia took me to a completely, well, I will use the word, it took me to a completely different universe. I don't know where I went. But the DMT didn't do that. But what was really interesting is DMT, like, I remember, like, the only thing I really remember from it is that all the sky seemed very intense because we were at your property in Robertsville, and like the stars just like came out at me. Like I felt like I could see every star. And like I remember there was always a part of me that felt like guilty doing like psychedelics because it's the stigma in my mind, right? Like, oh, you're doing drugs. What would your parents think of you? And I remember eventually, like, because it was fear, and I also had a headache from something else. I had been at work all day and I had a headache at work. And my DMT experience, I remember, kind of like took me, I felt like for the first time my consciousness like split into like two different personalities. So like the thing that's like saying, telling me like, what are you doing? What would your parents like? It seemed to like get like pulled to like the right side of my brain, almost to where like it was like its own little voice yelling and screaming at me, going, wah, 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 you do these things, you're bad, blah, blah, blah. And I remember like I was separated from it and I was like looking at it like, oh my God. I said, what is this kicking, screaming child yelling at me right now? And it's the psychedelic voice that's always with me. Although I actually think it's probably just my consciousness. I think it's always with me. It's the good voice in my head. It's just much more loud and clear when I'm in that experience. And it's telling me that little voice that's yelling and screaming at you is what you listen to every single day. It's the voice that tells you can't do anything. It's the one that tells you you're not good enough. It's the one that makes you feel really bad. Just look at it for what it is. It's a kicking, screaming child. Isn't that funny that you would let such a little thing yell and scream at you all day? And I was like, yeah, that is really funny. Like, why do I listen to that? It was just like so obvious, at the time. And so then like, I felt like I was connected with you guys. Like I could feel like your thoughts and what you guys were thinking. And I even felt like, this sounds weird. I felt like the trees were like speaking to me. And I was like, are the trees like really speaking to me? And the voice is going, yes, yes, it is. But don't worry about that right now. And I felt like the trees were just like happy that I could hear them. I weren't having a conversation. I was just like, I felt like they knew that I could like interpret what they were doing. Cause I remember the wind really picked up. So somehow in that experience, I'm picking all this stuff up. I feel like the trees are talking to me. I feel like I'm picking up your thoughts. And so the voice that starts asking me, so Mr. Rick, when you go back to, reality, what are you going to do when you're done with this experience? Are you just going to sit around and talk about it with everybody? Like you're going to spend like the next 3 or 4 hours just talking and talking and talking. Like, if you realize that you don't need to talk to everybody, then, you can just like speak with your mind. Then what's the need to talk? And I was like, and that like really stressed me out. I was like, oh my God, like, we could like, is that we like, that's really possibility. Like we could speak to each other on our mind. I was like, and it's like, I'm telling me like, yeah, think about how much the world would change if nobody had to speak. Think of all the hours that would be saved, all the understanding that you could have by just speaking your mind through your mind. Everybody would know what everybody's thinking. Every project could get done in a split second, but you got to sit around and have meetings or sit around with your friends and talk about things. Why would you do that? And I was like, I felt empty. I was like, well, because I like to talk. I like to do that. And the voice was like, very well. And I remember like it sent me again. I felt like this low, like I felt like I was being like, brought back down. Like my consciousness was being back down, and the trees, everything, like I heard the trees, everything kind of starts to close up. And as soon as the conduit, as I say it, is closed in my mind, everything came to mind. I remember I just chuckled and I went, and then I hear Adnan go, and I hear and then Nathan goes, and then we all went, we all started laughing at the same time. Like we all came down at the same time, and Nathan just goes, man, I love you guys. And that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, no, I remember that, so the way it's, I think, did I go first again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the DMT, yeah.
So what happened was from the experience that we had with salvia, I kind of, knew that like it just rushes you in immediately. And so I just kind of like after I took it in, I just immediately handed it over because I knew I was going to be out, And so what was interesting was that, um, like you said, that buzz, that hum, that it immediately kind of like everything just kind of started feeling heavy, and it was just like this, oh, like this frequency change. It's almost like when you hear this high noise in your ear, and then your ear kind of shuts off, but also came with that heavy feeling, like it literally felt like something was coming down too. And so I kind of went with it, and I closed my eyes, and then it became more and more and more and more intense. And I was like, where in the hell is this going? And I'm sitting there, and I don't know that I ever just talked to you guys about this or discussed this, but so I'm sitting there, and it's like getting to a point to where it's like taking over my entire body. And the next thing I know, I'm at this, basically frequency where I'm sitting there and I'm smiling, and it's basically an orgasm. And it was like this weird feeling because there was nothing bodily happening. It was just this state of being. And it was a bit confusing, but I didn't think about that. It was just like I just let myself be immersed in that experience. And so it lasted however long it did, and it just kind of subsided back to how it was. There wasn't anything kind of weird happening or whatever. And it was just the understanding of like, that is your true state of being. And I was like, whoa, it was just like really took me back, because we only ever think of, orgasms as something sexual, something we do, in hiding, and, we don't want our kids to see it, but it's okay if they see murder and killing and everything else, but, God forbid people making love, And so anyway, so that kind of talking about stigmas broke away that part that it's something naughty or whatever, and especially with such authority, like, that is your true state of being. It's like, wow, like that really, resonated with me, and then of course I'll get back into it later. This is like several months later where I understood more regarding that, but we'll get into that. So help me decide, guys, which was the psilocybin mushrooms next?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think
think
that was the order in which I started: salvia, DMT, and then mushrooms. That's how I remember in my line of going.
So talking about, intercommunication, right? And I think I remember for some reason, we didn't go outside, or we were outside, but went back in. And so, because it just took a while, and the only thing I remember from Nathan, he was just like hawking up a lung, I don't know, just.
I was purging.
Yeah, whatever you were doing. And I was like thinking, are you okay? But I was like slowly starting to feel like whatever was happening with me, I'm like, I got to worry about that. I'm sure you will work it out, as long as you don't die, and Rick was just, you were just there, just relaxing. We were basically waiting for it to kind of kick in, because differently from everything else, it has to digest, and then it kind of gets distributed in your bloodstream or wherever it goes, whatever happens. I'm not too familiar with the process, but the whole idea is that it takes a while. It's not immediate, at least not for me. And so but I remember it was enough to where we went back inside. And so what was interesting is then I started feeling the same feelings that were there present during salvia and DMT, took me to the same place again. But what was different this time around, was I was sitting there on my table. You were kind of laying down on the couch, but it was just Rick and I sitting at the table, and Rick was talking about something else. And for like a split instant, I don't know if you remember this, Rick, I looked at you, you looked at me, and we connected, and we could understand, and almost like, oh, we could, if we wanted to, we could just read each other's minds, almost like we were recognizing that we're one. And I just kind of smiled, and he smiled, and we started laughing together because we were looking at each other, recognizing this information going back and forth, and I remember just laughing about it. What do you remember from that, Rick?
Yeah, I do remember that. And I've actually had that with other people, that I've engaged in experiences with too. Like that same kind of thing happens. And I also remember at that point, for some reason, I looked at Nathan, and Nathan, like I felt like shape shifted into like a 12-year-old version of himself. Like he was
Oh
like,
yeah.
it looked like I don't know, almost like looked like he was like going through something or thinking through something, and he had like this smile. And I felt like whatever state that he was in, he was like reverting to his 12-year-old self. I was like, oh look, there's kid Nathan. Oh yeah, it's strange.
Okay, so that was that the entirety of your experience, or was there more?
Oh, I mean, of course, there's more. I mean, that was a very long. I mean, it was a very long evening. I mean, I think it's really hard for me to like recount everything that happened. I just remembered that it like, I also remember just like I was just being captivated because you guys went inside, and I just felt like I needed to sit in a chair and just like just take in what was going on because I'd never like mushrooms are so much lighter, than like salvia or DMT. You don't get like this launch or this like new universe, but you do have like this like really like interesting form of clarity. Which was why I was like, man, everybody talks about mushrooms like why think they're so bad. Like, what is so bad about what's happening right now? And because it wasn't like being drunk. I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel like I was out of my mind. I actually felt like I was very clear, and there was like things that I was like making sense of. And like you said, Adnan, we connected on levels like maybe that we always connect on. We're just like not aware of it because we're
Right.
just so clouded with whatever junk we've got going on in our brains with whether I mean there's a part of your brain, like unfortunately I'm not an expert on this, but there's a part of your brain that houses what they consider the
Hold
ego.
on. Is there an expert really ever out there?
Well, I mean, when it comes to experiences, maybe not, but there's been study at least on the brain that kind of coincide with why people might experience what they do. And so like when they say, for example, like they feel like they're more conscious on mushrooms, it might just be that, there's other parts of the brain that are being activated or other parts of the brain that are being deactivated that are usually super activated every single day. So your altered reality is because of the altered um the altered processing going in your brain, which is why some things might seem familiar to you because these are things that you are experiencing and you are picking up, but maybe you're just not as consciously aware of it because you've got the ego brain on all day, and it has a different perspective. So I don't know. It might be that we're always connected that way. We're just not as aware of it. So I don't know. I mean, that's not
Oh,
really go. Go ahead.
well, would you say that it basically um, kind of it starts out slow and it keeps rising and rising and rising, and then it peaks and then it kind of mellows off? Because there's several times where I thought like, okay, wow, that was whatever I was going through, whatever I experienced, it kind of peaked. And then I was like, okay, that's, not peaked, but like it felt like that was it. But that was just the beginning. Just, when I relaxed and I thought, okay, I can go about getting a cup or whatever. I'll be in the middle of grabbing a cup, and then another experience starts. I don't know if you guys,
Sure, sure. They call it
had that
peaking.
experience, but
It
go
comes
ahead.
in waves, but it also has like even like on the down, like on the trough, so to speak, where you feel like it's wearing off. I feel like there's always a part of you that knows though that it's still kind of there. Like there's always like this underlying feeling of like I'm not done with you yet. you know
Mhm.
so you'll be like I don't know, and then all of a sudden the wave comes, and the wave can be good, sometimes it's not so good, sometimes like I don't know, you might get like I feel like during a lot of experiences too, I'm also like reminded of my like inevitable perish on this planet, like life is good, life is great, but it doesn't last forever. And it's always kind of like a oh no, like I feel like I'm like Pinocchio or something, or like the boy that came here to play. And it's like my
Mm,
parent telling me at some point it's gonna be time to come inside again. So yeah, and I'm always like, oh, and that can really make my experience tough. And I don't know, it's a
right.
weird wave. It's a weird wave.
Well, I wanted to share just don't want to move on before I cover this part. So I don't know if what during this time we're still in that room. I think you were still on the bed or whatever, but we were just talking to each other, and then each one of us would kind of go in and out after each experience. Well, I remember I don't know how we brought up or how that subject came about. But we were talking about the Illuminati.
Yeah, I was.
You remember that?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I
And so I
was.
remember looking at the dollar bill, And I was like, oh, guys, look, the Illuminati tried to control us. But at that point, we were laughing, not because we were like out of control because of the substance, but because on this different level, you realize there's nothing out there that is a threat. That's what I perceived. And I'll let you guys talk about that, about that as well. Just hold that thought. I'll remind you of it too. But for one, that there is no threat. But then what happened is basically is that as I was watching that pyramid with that eye, more information came to me. And I don't know if I ever relayed that to you guys at that moment. Maybe you might have heard me talk about it. But what's interesting is that I saw the whole world as basically like this experiment, right? But not experienced by somebody else, experiment by some, imposed by somebody else, but it's our experiment as these beings that we are, these unlimited, infinite beings, to reduce ourselves to this level, to what we're experiencing now, and to just see what would happen. Not knowing who we are, not remembering, and basically developing life. And I could just see history happening, the ships sailing over the oceans, discovering new land and all this other stuff that was happening. But what was interesting is that then, I don't know if it was you or Rick that mentioned something about, but what about the ones that are controlling us? I could see how small of a group that actually is that has convinced themselves that they can control this somehow, right? That's what I was seeing at that moment, that they can control this somehow. And so through industry, through corporations, through these different companies, it's like a hidden hand to where they try to kind of push and move these pieces into place. But this is the part that then went on to the next level for me, which was beyond that. There was like these selective 6 or 7, I still can't hone down the number, oversouls. It's kind of like these 6 or 7, I guess, energy beings, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how to describe them. That were basically left in charge to stay awake and stay aware of who they are, who we all are, to kind of be there so that we don't like just fuck everything up. It's kind of like while we're all doing this game, while we're playing this game out, they're holding this higher frequency and are, making sure that things don't go crazy, so that even these guys that we call the Illuminati are not necessarily aware of this specific group. And that's what I experienced, during that time. And so that's when and then because then it took that whole thing out. It was like, oh, it's just an experience. Some people are going to have a great one. Some people are going to have bad ones, such as being homeless, no food, no home. Obviously, that's homelessness. But just relationships, horrible relationships, horrible relationships with people. And so the whole point was that there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about. Everything is just fine. Just keep on living, living your experience, doing what you got to do, and it will all reveal itself eventually. So, Nathan, what did you have any other experiences during that time?
Yeah, like Rick said, several. But I do remember that particular. That was actually my takeaway from that experience. I think that was our the connectedness we shared. And then the thing on the Illuminati, we were kind of, because up until then, it was something we always feared and talked about, and we researched, we shared information with people, and we, for some reason, you looked at that dollar bill, and I don't know how much went through your head, but we shared it with us, and we just realized that how ridiculous it was to be afraid of these people. So, and how to spend so much time trying to figure out their plan and how to stop their plan and stuff like that, when it's I don't want to say it's just a game, but it's definitely just an experience. And there's
well, I don't mean a game in a downplaying it sense. It meaning game as in you were a participant who chose to be here, not trying to belittle experiences, or anything like that. That's what I mean by game.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to explain it. Yeah, and that's kind of what I remember. That was my takeaway from that experience. That the main thing was just kind of like, I don't think I ever looked at the Illuminati the same way again. I don't think I ever had that same sort of fear that I had over, this thing, this secret hand that controls everything that you can't control, that you can't, it's out of our control. So what? So what?
Right.
that that was
Rick, what about you?
This actually reminds me. I can't believe I forgot about this. I think about actually this experience that we all had was like I think 10 years ago. I think we were like 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time
No,
ago, but
time flies.
I do remember like when we finally all came together for the first time, we all went outside, back outside. And that was something I remember happened. I remember like all of a sudden I started realizing like how ridiculous everything that we're doing. Like because I was really stressed out at my job. I mean, for even years after that, I was still stressed out about my job, and like I remember thinking it was so ridiculous that everybody's like speeding on the highway to get to work on time. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna be late. I gotta get to this job. And like, oh, look out, there's chemtrails and and I remember thinking, like, my God, we're like scared of everything. Like, what is the deal? Like, what is everybody? I remember just asking that out loud. Like, what is everybody doing? Like, what are we all doing here? Like, and I remember just like seeing like the planet is just like the trees and the grass, and here we are, these human beings living this experience that we created, and we've created this very stressful situation, and at that moment, I just thought it was really stupid. I'm like, why do we do this? And I remember just thinking, like, I don't know. I just thought, I think we create a lot of stress, and we freak out about all kinds of things. And like, actually, really, you think about it. I mean, like, all of us are going to die anyway. So it's just like, but we'll freak out about little tiny things that maybe won't concern us or will never. I don't know. I mean, I I don't know what to say. I just remember thinking it was just really funny, everything.
Right. Were there any other experiences you had during that night?
Um, During that night, I mean, I guess I felt like you guys did too about things like, like generally, I think everything's going to be okay, but, then of course I'm also reminded of like, why things aren't always okay, because like we're all here sharing an experience. Like we're a bunch of kids playing in a sandbox, but not everybody plays nice, and it's I don't know. It's twisted. I think I don't know. It's twisted. I did learn on another mushroom experience later that I felt like, the mushroom looks like kind of like it's like a dome, it kind of like almost like it sends out like a radio signal. What I want like, well, your brain does the same thing. So like if you want something or you even feel something, like, you dream about something, you send waves out and your waves bounce off other people's waves, and those waves will come back to you, but they come to you in the form of natural law. So, it might be a sign that you see, it might be something somebody says to you, it might be something somebody introduces you to, like giving you things that you need to get what you want. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily always something good. Maybe it's like an experience that might make you feel bad, but it's something you need to experience because you need to learn from it. Like the universe, I don't think necessarily cares whether you're happy or not, because it's only giving you what you need, not necessarily, well, maybe it is giving you what you want, but it can be in the form of tough love too. But because we're not completely in tune with everything, there are things that will be sent your way, like little signs, yeah, I guess symbols that you just might not recognize. And these things happen every day, and they happen every day with everybody. So the mushroom like taught me that, like felt like, wow, like it's you live in a planet where there's these different laws, but like we have these different like natural laws that we live under. So, and we can't break them. So we're learning to navigate through all of that. That's what I've learned from it.
So before, we go on much further with, with more of the other experiences and whatnot, I wanted to cover at least just at this point, or was there another point? Have you, either of you, at this point, seen any kind of like beings or specific like that came by to kind of be your guides or to talk to you, anything like that? I'm asking for that specifically, not things that happen like Rick was talking about, children and he was interacting. I'm talking about specifically like there was a being that was very visual to you, looking straight at you, kind of saying, hey, I'm your guide, or I'm here to kind of help you with this experience. Basically something like that. Nathan, do you remember anything like that?
From what I can remember right now, no, not in the strictest sense. Like not a humanoid bipedal being. Like there was the experience on the DMT where I encountered this very intelligent, hyper intelligent, very intelligent that it was it's been a while now, and I know there was a message I was supposed to take back. Do you guys might remember, maybe because I remember it was very important, and it was very intelligent, and it was, like I said, it was a geometric shape of sorts, or an undulate, maybe a changing geometric shape, and then these, almost like electrons flying around it, and it was conveying something, but I can't remember. It was too long ago now. I feel bad. Maybe Rick or you, or do you remember what that was? But other than that, no, nothing like a reptilian or a gray or anything like that. Not on psychedelics specific.
Okay, no, I don't. What about you, Rick?
No, I've never seen any kind of being or anything show before me. No.
So was it? What about later?
I can't say that I feel like I've ever like hallucinated. Well, if you whatever word you want to pick, right? I've never seen anything like necessarily like appear in front of me like in this reality. Like like where like if I'm sitting in your backyard, for example, and then I saw like a being or something. No, I've never seen
Right. No.
that.
I mean, it doesn't have to be in this reality. I'm talking about wherever you shifted to, whatever you were doing.
Well,
Was there visual? If not,
there
was there at least an auditory guide?
Well, there's always well, actually, it's like I've referred to several times. There's that voice that guides me through everything. And that's there actually through every experience I've ever had. It's always there. But the closest I guess I could say then to like having any kind of being would be when I did ayahuasca in Peru. I got a very clear mental, almost like kind of like I was dreaming at the same time that I was awake. It was a very vivid image of what I considered to be my higher self. And I could describe to you what he looked like. He looked like me. Actually, I even commented to him about how he looked. He looked to me to be like an 18-year-old version of myself, but like was like in really like in pretty good shape. Like he wasn't like super muscular. He's like the same size as me. I'm like an average guy, but he had like some tone on him, just a little bit of tone on his arms and his, a little bit on his stomach, not like, ripped or anything, but he just looked like he was in good shape. His skin had absolutely no blemishes on it. His hair looked really nice and full. He looked healthy. He looked younger than me, and he was smarter and more secure than me. And I remember I asked him, like, he told me, like, I'm you. And I was like, well, if you're me, then why don't I look like you? Because I'm like, at this time, I'm like 32. I'm like a little overweight, and he's like, well, part of it's because you haven't been living a healthy lifestyle. You've submitted yourself to working a job that you hate. You've been smoking, you've been drinking a lot. So, it's safe to say that you really haven't been taking care of yourself. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, but the other thing is that you're 32 years old. And I was like, well, I don't want to be 32 years old. He goes, well, yeah, you do. I said, well, what do you mean? Why do I want to be that? He's like, because you chose to be 32 years old. And I was like, how did I choose to be 32 years old? And that's when I was given the images of like drinking water and eating and doing everything I do to survive on this planet. Because he's like basically saying, if you didn't want to be here, you would choose not to be here. And you know how you can choose not to be here. And I was like, oh. And we went into a long discussion after that.
No, continue. I mean,
okay. I wasn't sure if you want me to
started it.
Okay, well, so anyway, I was like, I started just getting these images, and he's like, he basically like confirmed to me. He's like, like, hey, our time here is limited, so I know everything seems very, like clear to you now, but make sure you get your questions answered because you're gonna forget most of this when you go back. You know how this game works. I was like, okay, and I was like, so he's like, basically, he showed me this. He's like, you chose to. He said, basically, I exist because of you. If you didn't exist, I wouldn't exist. I'm a culmination of all your experiences that you're learning right now. So you chose to be 32 years old, just like you're going to choose to be 40 years old, just like you're going to choose to be 50. All of these experiences are different because being a 50-year-old is different from being a 30-year-old because it's not just about like how you feel as an old person, but it's also how society also looks at you. So you're going to be growing, learning like as your body gets more physically, hampered down, you're going to feel the physical strain of being 50. Your looks are going to change. People are going to look at you differently, but you're also going to learn these things. All these different things that you're learning are part of what makes your learning experience here on Earth. And you chose to be here. So without you, I wouldn't exist. So you have to keep living. So you chose to be where you are because that's what you chose to do. And I was like, okay. And he's like, and some of the things that are physically straining you are like things that are happening on the planet right now, but that's not really for us to discuss at the moment. And that's not something you're really going to figure out maybe necessarily in this lifetime. So, just keep doing what you're doing, and be proud of who, and he's like, and be proud of who you are, like you finally left your job, you have the power to do what you want. You're afraid, so just recognize, what you're capable of doing. It's that simple.
And so was this experience more did did it kind of lead up to this, or did it take a while to get there? That's what I'm
This
trying
was
to ask.
Absolutely. So this happened during the week that I spent in an ayahuasca center in Peru, and so we drank 3 different nights. And I so the first, it was almost like a 3-part series. Like it worked out perfectly like that. Like the first night I took it, I freaked out. Like I would say generally on psychedelics, like before that, I did pretty okay. Like I had some things that were unnerving and made me feel a little nervous, but I didn't feel like I freaked out ever. But this first night I had an ayahuasca in Peru just completely freaked me out because I had traveled by myself from Colombia to Peru, like by bus and by taxi. And I think and not only that, I had also quit and left my job. So I completely jumped in a place where like, I wasn't even like, comfortable, but like, I was so set on my goal. Like, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going freaking south because I said I'm doing that. And I did it. And like, there was a fear that was chasing me the entire time. So when I did ayahuasca in Peru, my first night, all that fear came back to me and exposed itself, and it reared its ugly head at me. And I had one of the most terrifying experiences of my life during that. And like I spent my like night in the bathroom by myself, per the experience, per the permission of the ayahuasca center. I was like, can I go to the bathroom? And he said, yeah. And then I was like stuck in there, and I felt like there was like something breathing through me. It was like a demon. Oh man, it was nuts. And like, so the first night was really bad. The second night was more kind of like a bridge. Like I remember like people would say that when you do ayahuasca, like you can feel the spirit's fingers like feeling over you. And I remember feeling like I felt like I was like being scanned. So my second night was kind of, I call it the bridge. The second night was me just being calm and trying to understand what the experience was doing to me. And then the third night was the night where everything made sense, and the guide came to me and was like, okay, so let's review what happened and get you to understand why you had to go through what you just went through. So yeah, it took 3 days it was my third day that led up to that.
Oh, okay. All right. So, Nathan, what about you regarding is do you want to maybe skip forward and let's say, do you want to share your negative experiences? Because I know it's always great to talk about the positive, and though I believe they're way more prevalent than negative experiences. But do you want to jump to that and kind of recall that that cluster?
So I can't think of any. I mean, man, I my mind works really well at blocking out negative memories, like things that bad have happened to me in my life, even growing up. I just don't seem to remember them as well as I do the positive ones. I think I think that works that way for everybody. I could actually, one thing that Rick kept, when he was talking about this, it kept reminding me about another experience that I would want to just comment on briefly, but it was overwhelmingly positive, not negative.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this was actually, I guess, the second time I did mushrooms. I did a lot less because I had decided to share them with my friends, and we went to the park. We had a great time. We were looking at all the beautiful the nature and just being one with it, and we could feel it breathing, and it was just felt very interesting, and everything we looked so interesting. I inspected everything, every leaf, every bug so closely, took everything right to my eyes and just was amazed. And then when we were walking back to our house, I kind of thought the experience was almost over, but it was not. For me, it was about to culminate. And we're standing there for some reason. We stopped and we're standing in a group, and I guess I just assumed that these guys were all experiencing the same thing I was. And I had one of these experiences where everything, whether it was a guide or what, but it just, everything, the answer to the universe was just open to me. And there is a term for it in mysticism. I think the Hindus have a word for it, but I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, and everything was just open and explained to me everything I ever wanted to know. The purpose of every blade of grass was just there. It was made obvious and clear to me. And it was like, oh, well, of course, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. Man, great. And I thought for sure, because everything was so clear, it was so clear and evident to me that I would remember this and I would be able to explain it. But, and then when it started to fade, I came back and I looked at my friends and I was like, well, don't you know, this is why we're here. This is what I did. You guys saw it too, right? And of course they didn't. And I've had similar experience, almost every trip. Actually, I have a moment like that where things just become super clear. And it's just like, oh, well, obviously this is all makes perfect sense. Well, then there's no reason to be afraid. We chose to do this or whatever the purpose is. Now negative experiences, like we were talking before the show started, there was one time, I don't know why I was possessed. Maybe that's the right word. I was possessed. Rick and I took a little bit of LSD, and first of all, I don't recommend doing any drugs. I don't think they're necessary. I think through meditation, through just spiritual experience, just opening yourself up. But if you are, I stay the hell away from man-made ones. Start with all of the things God put here. You know what I mean? And if you feel adventurous, it's on you. It's up to you. But for whatever reason, one time I was possessed to take more acid after we'd already taken enough. We probably took a hit each, maybe two. I don't know. It was a little vial, had about half full. I think it was 100 when it was full, but it had about half. And we each took a little drop, and it should have been fine. And for whatever reason, I was possessed to take the rest of it.
Just chug it?
I don't know. Yeah, I just took the rest of it. There was probably just a few drops left in the bottom of the vial. I ended up in the hospital that time. So, and there was good experiences and horrendous experiences with that. Oh, I absolutely did meet entities then. I forgot about that. I was with these guys. This one was, and it almost maybe like they were, I don't know, different archetypes of humanity. Maybe like there was one that was he was like a big purple alien looking thing, but just like with tentacles. And he just looked like he was like the archetype of being, just gluttonous, like just consuming everything that comes to him, and I know we had a conversation, but man, it was too intense for me to really bring back. And Rick might actually remember better because he quizzed me on it after I came back. And some of the experiences were very moving. And I encountered like 3 or 4 different entities on that trip. I forgot about that. It's just that it was so intense. And actually, I kind of want to just block that out from my memory because I did end up in the hospital. It would change my life. It's like one of those things. It's like, all right, I need to, that was the last time I ever touched anything like it, So I don't know what possessed me, what overcame me to do that, but I did it. And maybe
if you don't want to get into it, but do you mind sharing what happened at the hospital?
Oh, at the hospital?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember, so I don't remember anything. I don't remember going to the hospital. All I do is remember waking up in the hospital. I remember being in this bed, and they actually Rick knows the story better, and but it's like maybe what actually happened at the hospital. I don't know. Keep that private, Rick, because what he explained to me, I guess we could talk about it. But it's the next thing I really remember is I remember finally identifying where I was and coming to, but then like going back out because it was still kind of in waves, and I had I would talk with these entities or whatever, or have these experiences and then come back. And then, evidently, I wasn't making any sense talking to the doctors and stuff. And eventually I was like, I'm ready to go home. And one of the doctors was like, well, do you know where you are? And I looked out the window and I could see a monument that I knew exactly where I was by seeing that. I've seen it a million times. I've driven past it, it's the top of a building that I recognize. And Rick was actually on LSD too. So he said he kind of communed with me and he realized that there was some other entity, not a good one, a very demonic one, like some sort of, like I said, I think I went through all the different archons of humanity. And this was like the pervert entity or whatever, all the different demons of humanity, the demons we classify as demons, whether they're good or bad, I don't know, who's to say.
Are you talking about the actual or just like a representation of?
Well, no, it's felt like there was this entity with me,
right,
know,
okay.
and he was kind of like, I don't know if he was maybe possessing me, if that's the right word. He was just like super gluttonous and just consuming everything, just food and whatever garbage he could put into his body. Maybe it was representative of me putting this much LSD in my body. And then, it was creepy. It was life-changing. Let's move to Rick, see if he remembers anything more about that experience or his own experiences.
Yeah, Rick, what do you remember?
about Nathan's experience?
Yeah.
Well, I obviously wasn't in the same plane as he was, but on this plane, it was terrifying. like what to see him going through that, because like I remember like he didn't even like look like himself. Like his eyes, everything, like like it was like the shape of Nathan, but it wasn't Nathan. Like just his eyes, he looked like a bird or something. It was really bizarre, man. And he was like like it wasn't even him. You know, like he was, and I remember my brother was with me because, well, like we both just took a little bit of LSD, right? Because I was thinking, well, you know, I've got like this creative video project I want to work on. Maybe this might help me. I thought we were just going to chill and have some music, but like something happened when I took a step outside, and I remember coming inside and he's on the ground like convulsing or something. And I was like, what the heck? And I'm like looking around to see if like he took something else. Like I didn't know. And all of a sudden I see this empty vial of LSD and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. No. I was like, I remember I was like, why would you do that? And so like, I was like, oh my God. So, you know, I had my brother come over. My brother had just gotten back from Thailand. So this is like 2 a.m. And, you know, he's like jet lagged and he lives right down the street. So I'm like, can you come over here and tell me like what's happening? And like, do I need to call somebody? Cause I don't know what's going on. So my brother comes over and sees this. He's like, is this? And he was like, kind of like saying like weird stuff and on the ground, like going, and I'm like, and my brother goes, I've never seen anything like that before. I'd call the ambulance right now. I was like, okay. So I called.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I don't know how I even forgot about this. Did you call me? I think you were trying to call me. Okay, I remember now. Oh my God, how could I forget about that? Because he was calling me, you know, and he was basically you're saying it's like, Adnan, this is what's happening. I'm like, yeah. It's like, what should I do? I'm like, what happened? And he told me. I was like, holy fuck. You know, it's like, why would he do that? You know, because I don't know. Like, it's one thing. It's like I trust myself to do stupid shit when I'm by myself and no one else around. But it was so unlike you. And I was like, man. And he was telling me about stuff. And I'm just like, well, I was telling him it this way. It's like, look, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. I think I remember saying something to you like, it's one thing that if he's going through experiences and he needs to go through that. But if he does end up dying, you know, there's a lot to be explained that he's going to leave you behind that's going to have to deal with that. So go ahead and call the hospital if I remember that correctly. Please clarify.
Well, yeah, at this point we'd already been at the hospital for several hours. So, you know, my brother came with me, you know, and like I remember like after being there, and of course I'm tripping too. I've got LSD, so I'm trying to like, you know, keep my cool. And you know, I'm also worried like, great, are they gonna like, you know, bust us all now for having like some substance? Like I didn't know what was gonna happen. I'm like, but I was seriously, I was in the position of I'm either gonna risk going to jail for, you know, possessing or having at least indulged in some kind of federally scheduled drug, or, you know, my friend's going to die and I'm going to go into jail for life for that. Like I'm not going to let my friend die. I don't care what happens. This is not what's going to happen. So I called, but I'm also freaking out, you know, that he's going to die, or if he doesn't die, we're both going to get in trouble, or, you know, he's going to die and I'm going to get, I had to keep myself so cool. And I remember like sitting in the chair and the doctors were trying to ask me what happened. I couldn't even remember what happened because I'm like, I remember at one point sitting in the chair, like just going through my mind. And like, I saw like this chair, like the floor was even moving. And at one point there was like a light that started appearing in front of me. I'm like, no, come on, not now, please. Like I need to focus on this reality right now, you know, and everything ended up being fine. Even my brother told me, he goes, actually, Rick, he goes, you were actually behaving quite fine. Like I wouldn't have even known you were on a drug. So I think everything was okay. I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, you actually handled yourself pretty well on it. I said, oh, all right, well, thanks. Cause there was some weird shit happening in my brain, but nobody noticed it.
Hold on.
And
how would he know if he was also?
No, Carrie, my brother wasn't on it. No, my brother.
Okay.
No,
right. You called him. That's right.
Yeah, he came over because I said I need a sober mind to analyze the situation because I think I'm freaking out. I'm not in a position to be making any kind of calls right now. I didn't know this was going to happen, you know? And so anyway,
so sorry, man.
No, I'm just glad it didn't turn out worse because it could have been worse, you know? And so like, but anyway, I remember I had to take a break. I had to go. I was like, Carrie, can you just like sit here for a minute? And like, you know, he's like, yeah. Because that's when I went outside to take a breather. Adnan, I called you. We're on the phone. So, you know, so Nathan's in ICU, right? So there's like, you know, all these different beds that are around, right? And like, all these people are laying around, and I walk in, and my brother's just sitting there looking with this horrified look on his face. But I remember like Nathan was kind of going like it was whoa, it was so weird.
Horrible.
Yeah, oh, it's great. And my brother, I was like, Carrie, what's going on? He goes, Rick, he goes, he's like speaking some weird languages. Like, it's like he's having like conversations with things. I swear to God. It's like, really? He's like, no, he's like talking to something, and he's like speaking in like different languages. Like, it's like really freaking weird. I was like, and I remember, I remember Nathan had his eyes were closed and his head was like to one side, and he's going, and then he turned his head to the other side. He goes, yeah, that's interesting. That's really fucking interesting. I was like, holy shit. I was like, oh my God. Like, it's so eventually the doctors come and start asking, like, all right, so what's his name? His name's Nathan. All right, Nathan, Nathan, where are you from? You're like, what state you're from? You're like, Missouri. And you're like, what city of Missouri? And he goes, reality. He's like, reality, Missouri.
Reality.
He goes, you're from reality, Missouri. And you're like, yeah, that's where I'm from. And I was like, so eventually the doctors like transferred him, and there was another doctor that came to me and was like, I just want to thank you very much for bringing him in today. I know that was probably very hard for you to do, but he really needed to come in here. Do you have any contact with his parents? I was like, my God, I'm going to have to contact his parents because it's Labor Day, and I know he's got plans with them. They're going to wonder where the hell he is. I'm like, great. Here we are in our 30s, and I got to call his parents, so I did. I haven't called his dad, and I had to admit to him what happened. And, it was an awkward conversation, but a good thing they sent him there, because apparently he told me he had to go on a breathing machine and all this stuff. So it got serious. It got really serious.
Wait, how far did you die?
No, I don't think so. No, I do remember the nurses did tell me I was speaking different languages.
Right.
And then,
and at that point, you didn't speak a different language.
I was learning Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I didn't speak it fluently. Yeah, but I do.
But it wasn't Spanish you spoke then?
No, the one nurse absolutely identified it as Spanish. Yeah, the one language. But and then there was like a positive takeaway from that. But and part of it is I don't need drugs or psychedelics or anything anymore. And maybe I just scared myself straight. That was just too much.
So yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, that was.
It's not about me, but I'm glad I did the fucked up shit on my own. So if something was going to happen, it would just be me and not everyone else involved. You guys go out to the whole new level. It's like, let's get everyone, because I got called, your parents got called, everything was going on. I was like, I'm just glad that at least for a very selfish reason, you're still here. You went through whatever you went through, whatever you got out of it to get out of it, and it just cracks me up because I see it because you know how we usually are. We just everything is fun, joke, and all that, and it's like when we know each other and someone says, "Oh, so and so did this," it's even that much funnier. You're like, "Yep," I can definitely laugh about this part because it's like we all know kind of each other's silliness, and so if we kind of do an exaggerated version of how we kind of generally are, it makes it that much more funny. Although somebody watching, they might be like, that's not funny. Like, you went to a hospital, this happened, that happened. What is so funny about that? But like they always say, sometimes you just got to laugh about life.
At it.
Right. Yeah. So, right. I can tell because when you had called me, you were talking and I was genuinely trying to, because it was late and I was wondering, like, Rick usually doesn't call me this late, but I know you're up, and I was like, what's going on? I was trying to, I think I must have missed you call the first time. So I called back because I thought it was something more serious. So if it's something that, you would need me to do, this point that I wanted to save for last is what lessons throughout all these different journeys that you've learned can you definitely say you've taken them and you've applied them to your life? Does it make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Nathan, do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult for me to go from that story to this, but I guess the main thing is that
it doesn't have to be in a particular order. It could be just pick certain things that you've learned and you're like, I'm going to take this
Sure.
with me? And
Well,
I
just
will,
in general, psychedelics, and I wouldn't say they've taught me directly, but maybe they were the key that I needed to just open up my awareness to something that I already knew. That's kind of what it always has come to me as. It's just something like, you already know this. Like, you know this. Like I don't know why you play these games and you act like you don't, but you do. And just don't forget, and you can go back and play your game. But remember, remember that it does have a purpose. There is an order. It doesn't matter how chaotic things seem. There is an order. It does have a purpose. Keep moving forward in a positive direction. Whatever you think is positive. I guess that's that piece. But that is important. Is to live proactively. I'm sure there's other that will come to me, but that's mainly it. That I get that sort of almost every time. Just sort of, or I even get that on weed sometimes. Like just sort of this. There is a purpose. It's good. It is good. Whatever it is, it's live proactively and live in love. Be loving and kind.
okay. Well, actually, totally forgot to ask. I don't want to skip over weed. So, we'll get back to that. Let me get the answer from Rick first. So, Rick, what about you? Was there anything specific that, like I said, that you've taken from many different journeys and you basically have applied it to your life?
Yeah, for me, it's actually a perspective more on like how people operate. I feel like, all these things that we've discussed about, are kind of, laughing matters, exciting, kind of the light show, so to speak. And that's all kind of entertaining to talk about so long as we survive it, right? But actually, I think the biggest thing I got from it was really how to deal with other people. I actually felt like my DMT experience, for example, was a direct result of how I like handled my job when I worked in retail as a customer service representative, because I realized that like I feel like, well, actually, it's true. Our life is a psychedelic experience because our bodies are made up of chemicals, and even from like, going from male to female, there's slightly different measurements of certain types of chemicals in each one of us. Therefore, that's why I even come to the conclusion, oh my God, that's why the female, like, well, we have other reasons too, but like, that's also why we might not necessarily understand how females think or why females wonder why men think the way they do, because I feel like it's probably something to do with the different balance of chemicals that we have. So we all share a very similar experience as males, and females have that other experience. And then of course that gets into the whole debate we have now of what is male and female. There's probably there might be a good reason for that in regard to like the chemical aspect, not just the biological aspect. But like when it comes to dealing with the customer too, I realized like, I got this idea from psychedelic experiences that like, I feel like everybody has like a core that runs through them, like that makes up themselves, like who they are as a self, as their true true selves. And like we have all these different things that can like rattle that rod and go around it and disrupt it. And it comes from many different reasons. But like, for example, like when a customer comes into the store and they start freaking out about, a product that, they got to return, or they don't like the fact that the line's too long, they start yelling and screaming or whatever it is. And I looked at that person, I realized, oh my God, this person's having a psychedelic experience. What do I do when one of my friends is having a bad time during a psychedelic experience? You sit there and you help them and you balance them. You just let them go through it and then bring them back to earth. And I remember like not long after my first mushroom or the DMT trip, I had this experience with this woman who was mad that we wouldn't put a rope to guide people. And she's like, why don't you put, and I was a supervisor too. And she's like, why don't you put a sign there? And I'm like, I said, I understand, ma'am. I know exactly why you're upset about that. I said, I know it makes sense to put a sign there. They just won't let us do it. She's like, well, I just think that's really stupid. And she just keeps going on and on and on. And I just kept really calm and just kind of like gazed at her, kind of like I would gaze at my friend during a psychedelic experience. And I remember as she's like getting crazy, she's like, they put this down there. And she stops. She goes, she stops. She looks at me. She smiles. She goes, you're doing a great job. And I was like, thank you. It was like she got it. And so I felt like I feel like my psychedelic experiences helped me become more forgiving of other people going through their own psychedelic experiences. So I told my friend, like one of my friends, that like she said her best friend was pregnant and she was acting really strange. I said, well, why don't you just let her go through experience? She's having a psychedelic experience right now, and she doesn't know how to handle all of it. She's pregnant. There's all kinds of things going. So just, just guide her through it. Don't take it personal, whatever she says. And she's like, all right, I'll try that approach. She's just having a psychedelic experience. And that's what I think it is. It's very much like that.
I had a similar experience what you were describing. So this was during one of my times when I was basically, I had I guess maybe I could tell it now. I guess there's better time than any. One of these times, now that everyone would know, I always refer to you as my friend, but now they know who this friend is. So you had come over and we had our trip, right? And with psilocybin mushrooms. Well, you didn't know where else you were going to leave it, so you're like, "Hey, can I leave this stuff with you?" With you, and I'm like, "Sure." I mean, got the whole house to myself, no kids, nobody's going to get into it, And this was like a lot. It was like a bag of just a lot of mushrooms, and I was like, "Okay, so." You had, you left, everyone else left. And so this was 2 days later. I don't know what obviously talking about one of those things where you're just like, I don't want to use the word possess, but there was something like a drive within me that just says, let's just take the whole bag. There's no idea why I thought that. Like, let's just take the whole bag, And so I was thinking, but he's going to be pissed, It's like I basically took up his whole stash, and I was like, I'll just pay him. I'll just pay him back, and it'll be fine. He can get more. Everything will be okay, And so then basically, I just started eating it and eating. And I ate up the whole bag, right? And I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like, yeah, nothing's going to happen. Yeah, that was my mindset. I was like, yeah, bull, And so as I was, basically sitting there, this slowly, it starts winding up, but that time I was already in bed thinking nothing's going to be happening. And so I was just basically, I think it got me the closest that I could say to death that I can remember, because at this point it was after my Hawaiian baby Woodrow seeds where I had the near-death experience, and so this was like very much like on that verge, right? But it was to a point to where all these other things that I've been learning from Buscher at that time were kind of like being conveyed to me about how time is happening by us shifting our reality billion times a second. And so by us doing that, shift after shift after shift creates this illusion of time and passage of time, And so that was going through my head as I like moved my head over, because I was trying to kind of adjust myself. I moved my hand, and there was like a bazillion hands there. Then I moved my hand again, and then the same hand was there. And I was like doing all kinds of, till my vision was basically just blurred up with a whole bunch of my hands, and each of one of the individual frames was left behind from the origin to wherever it ended up at. And so that was interesting to have a visual of that. But then again, it was one of those examples where I wasn't necessarily seeing with my eyes. I could see the reality I'm in, but there was another experience, to be had. Well, anyway, that then got so deep. I think it's going to take me like another 2-3 hours to explain that experience. But I'm just going to skip forward to make a point to what Rick was saying. So, Rick, what was interesting is that the next day, I was still very much in touch, right? I was still very much in touch with this aspect of oneness. And this is something that I don't know, we haven't gotten into very much, but it's like that we're basically all one, And as I was, having that, driving to work, right? And that, it was like this understanding that all my experiences, all my family members, all my friends, everything is within. And so as I was driving to work, I was like, well, then what is the point of me trying to go out there to make contact with the person? Just contact, get in touch with this, with Nathan, with my part that is Nathan, with my part that is Rick, and everyone else that I know. Just get in touch there. And I don't have to traverse through any space, through any kind of challenges or difficulties. Just get in touch there. And so I was still kind of very much going through that as I'm going to work. I'm entering the building, I'm scanning my ID, and I'm sat down in my cubicle. So my boss, she came to me, and I was at my desk, and she's like, "Hey, Edna," and I turned around, and she was basically like in the middle of like just rambling on and on about something about what I needed to do because I had just gotten there or whatever. And so I'm looking at her. I'm partially listening to what she's saying, but part of me, like, was still working that out. And I was like, well, she's also a part of my reality. And so I just went within and I just said, hi. The second I said that, she stopped talking. She immediately just stopped talking. And she's staring at me, and I'm just smiling, but staring back at her. And she's like, I have no idea what I was saying. I don't know why I just stopped. It was like, like just kind of stopped her in her tracks, but to have that correlation of the second I just kind of got in touch and it's just like, hi, it immediately saw a response, and that was the heaviest connection that I felt during that time, because obviously over the periods of time, you kind of get out of it, you then eat some food, you take some water in, and all that other stuff happens. So anyway, Rick, I'm just kind of, it's not exactly the same, but similar to where I was having an effect on my outside world based on my understanding. Do you understand what I'm saying, Rick?
Yeah, 100%. I think it does. And it's why, like, when somebody says, like, wow, you're a really unique person, it's like, no, it's just, I learned, I got a new perspective, and I learned something that maybe I'm equipped with that maybe other people aren't equipped with. And I think you learned the same thing. Like, it's kind of profound. There's definitely great things to be had and learned from psychedelic experiences. And I think they should be looked at as teachers, not a party. It's not a party. And it's not, like Nathan said, like, do I recommend that people go do psychedelics? I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's good for everybody necessarily. You just need to decide if it's right for you. And I don't know.
Well, I think it has to be purposeful. In my opinion, it has to have a purpose, because all of us, I know we had fun, but we weren't, I can't even say irresponsible with it, because based on when everyone listens to our stories, they're like, that is totally irresponsible. But at least we were not playing with other people's lives. Whatever was going on, I don't know if you guys would agree, like we all did it for our own reasons on our own time. And yes, it involved other people, but in the sense of we got their attention, but they were not in danger. They were not in danger. Whatever was going through was only going through for you, It's like, and if anything, God forbid, worse would have happened, it would have only happened to you. It's not like we were like, hey, let's, get high and then let's go drive, or any of the other silly stuff, which it's just, that is irresponsible. That's just, I don't know, that just boils my blood. It's like, if you're going to do something just on your own time with no one else around, but anyway, I wanted to, because I was initially, want to put into my 2 cents about, what have we learned that we taken with us, To me, it was like, the general over the period of all these different journeys, it was learning that everything is one. Everything is basically this one being it's experiencing itself throughout time and space, and it created itself into everything that it could possibly be. It's the rocks, it's the chairs, it's the air, it's everything. We're part of it. It's part of us. And because this is as I said before, like this is a game, is that everyone else is here to serve you on your journey, and basically be a reflection back to you of whatever you're doing. They're reflecting it to you so that you can then take it and analyze it and learn from it and figure some things out. And so the best way to describe it is basically like I always it wasn't from experience, just kind of my own imagination. I imagined basically just having these buttons, and it's always in the heart place, having a button that when you, I guess, somebody pushes it, that's what triggers you, whatever it is. Somebody says something, oh, I'm so pissed off, then they push another button, you're like, you're just mad about it. And so I was learning that all these people that are in your life to piss you off, to what we generally consider to be negative, they're there to show you, to say, hey, friend, you have a button there that that I can push. Look into it. Why is it that's there? If you're pissed off, why are you pissed off? Analyze it. It requires a lot of work, but once you figure it out, that button almost kind of like turns off and it's not active. So that next time they come around, they're like, let me push your buttons. And you're just like, it's malfunctioned, And so the whole, and that was the lessons I got from that, to where, yes, a lot of times when something happens, I'm like, that motherfucker, I will get pissed off, I whatever, but then I immediately stop and I go back and I'm like, I have this tool set that I can now use to say, all right, this person said this person did this, it made me mad. And now I can go like, why? What is it that made me react that way? And so I understand not everyone does this. They have their reasons why they don't do it. But for me, it's like, I'm only here as Adnan one time in this lifetime. And it's like, why wouldn't I make that part of my journey, trying to figure that out? Why wouldn't I, some people spend, and I love soccer, so I don't mean to say this in a negative way. I mean, some people spend a lifetime chasing after a ball. Mm-hmm. If you really break it down. It's grown-ass men chasing after a ball. And then they pat themselves on the back of who kicks the ball the best. Right? I mean, really, when you break it down in that way, it's like, and so they to them, it's a source of pride. So I was like, well, why can't I do the same, where I actually, not only will it help me, but then my friends would benefit from it. Because then they will ask me, and I'm almost like, well, I don't know if this would apply to you, but this is how I dealt with my problem, and so it could help them. It could not, I don't know, but that's what I got from these experience overall, like an overall general lesson journey from all these different, because it wasn't just one classroom, it was several different classrooms teaching me different things. But the very important part was this, that I think everyone, in their lives can apply. Anyway, so that's what I got from it. So, all right, I think we've been going on for a while. So for any of you out there, if you have questions, please make sure you put the 3 stars, and then ask a question after for a chat, or log into Telegram, and then I'll see you pop up on my list, and we'll ask a question of me, Nathan, Rick, or all 3 of us. So we'll hang around. If there's any questions, then of course we'll keep on going to answering them. Otherwise, we were thinking about just wrapping it up for today. I think we shared quite a bit, and I hope we gave you a perspective, 3 perspectives on what is happening, what can happen, and so I don't know, maybe there's people out there that are sharing it more openly or not, I don't know. But at least by us doing that, it will just expand your world a little bit more, So not saying or condoning that, any of this. We're just simply saying, this is what we did, this is what happened to us, take it or leave it.
I will add, there was the one takeaway recently, because actually, like I said, I don't touch anything I guess you'd call hard or serious anymore, but I do smoke weed periodically. And I think sometimes that can be, I think it's chemically classified as a hypnotic, but I think sometimes it's psychedelic, or especially if you eat enough of it, if you eat edibles. I was just one time in Bogota here recently, Bogota, the laws are always, sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's not. It was legal when we were there the last time, and you could just buy edibles at a store. And it was our last night. We were going to get on the plane the next day, and we're like, well, we don't know if we can take these or not. The laws are weird everywhere. So we just start eating these cookies. And I think the shop owner said, I don't know, take one bite, maybe share one cookie between you. And we ate like 8 cookies between my wife and I. It became pretty psychedelic. And I think the other takeaway, and even when I just smoke a little weed now, it's not only just the oneness of everything, but that the time is now. So like for some reason, that's very important to me recently. Like the time is now. Like now is a very important time in human history, I guess, or in the awakening process of us all. And it's the time is now. Like get up, do it. If you're going to try it, try it. We're not condoning it. If you're not, if you have something you've been wanting to do that you think will help people, if you want to write a book, if you want to start a website, if you want to act, if you want to, start a company, do it now. Like we have a short period of time here, and make it your best, enjoy it. And really there's, you don't fail if you don't give up. So just keep moving forward.
Rick, what about you? Do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think if I had any of those. No, not really. I mean, no, I don't. I think actually I agree with Nathan. The time, everything comes down to the time is now, because like, at the end of the day, like I do believe you write your own history. Actually what I was going to say, actually, this would be a good closing statement. Like, when it came to the fact where I had the experience of, like we could use telepathy to talk potentially. That's kind of maybe we can, maybe we can't. I don't know. But if that were possible, and we're in this stage of like talking, then like, why are we talking? Oh, because I like talking. And I think, well, like kind of like how a child has to go through that phase in their life where they like to really play with their toys. We as a collective society or as human beings have to go through a series of trials too. Like, obviously we're not nearly as well, I guess that could be debated. Are we as barbaric as we used to be? I don't know. I think it seems like things were pretty nasty, 500 years ago. I think things are a lot better now. That's what I think. But I feel like these are periods, even as a collective, we have to grow through. So, we make the choice as to when we're done with the experience that we need, and then we move on to the next experience when we're ready for it. So like, we can talk, we can watch videos of people doing karate or whatever, but at the end of the day, you have to walk the walk, and you have to make your choice as to when you want to make a change. And it's completely up to you. And the universe doesn't necessarily care what you do with it. That's up to you. So I don't know. That's my takeaway from it. You have the power to do what you want to do. People are presented obviously with different challenges in their lives. Some people don't have all their limbs, for example. It's not an equal playing field, but we are here to play the game, and the time is now, and we have stuff to learn from each other. That's what it's all about. That's what I think.
Nathan, thank you very much again. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to do this. And I think it's time for basically us just not to hide anymore about these different type of things, because if anything, even if you don't go down this route, there's still something to be learned. Thank you for being here too.
There is a
And
question
Rick,
that came in. I don't know if you have time to answer. It looks like there's a question that came in.
It wasn't so much of I can ask it, but we're off sync again, like the audio and video. So, but I guess I am recording, so maybe I can, if I edit it in later, we can take one in. It said if this is from Fab 22. We'll just take this one and then we'll make it quits, because otherwise it's going to be off sync way more, and it would be unwatchable. But yeah, so this is from Fab 22. Says, if you could find a natural way to access the part of consciousness you are looking to link, would you then move away from psych substances? Well, personally, yes, I've always talked about that. Once you've been on these frequencies, you realize you don't need, something like that. You can just, through meditation and just focus of just remembering again what it felt like being on that frequency, and you will be there. And once you're there, that's when information comes in and flows. So then you don't need it. I've always said that, I think, every time I do a show. But what would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe actually that's why I had that last experiences that was so intense, was to sort of snap me out, because maybe I was, because maybe I stopped looking at them as tools. Because I think almost every time we've ever done this, we've always looked at it very respectfully as a tool for a purpose, but Adnan's right. As soon as you've achieved certain vibrations, and you don't even need that tool to get there. There's always natural ways. I mean, and by natural, you don't. I'm sure the questioner doesn't mean LSD versus psilocybin mushrooms. It means meditation versus psilocybin mushrooms are all psychedelics. So yes, absolutely. That if once you can do that, you should practice it regularly.
Rick, what about you?
I
Answer
think
to this question.
I think the question about natural actually kind of like roots itself into, I mean, because like for example, mushrooms are natural. They're a food. So I mean, if you look at it as like a food and not a drug, it kind of looks a bit differently. We all know that it has a different effect on you, but I sometimes wonder, like, and I don't know if this is this is where the question's coming from, but like this question actually comes up by a lot of people, like, well, if you can do it through meditation, would you want to move away from it? And like, I personally, like, I think there's more than one way to get there. And I think I need to practice meditation. Actually, I've been told that my whole life. I have attention deficit issues, but I don't see necessarily what's wrong with taking, like if you use it responsibly or you treat it respectfully, or like if you looked at like this guy that I spoke with, I didn't talk about this, but I spoke with a guy in the airport yesterday that was in the Army for
You go
7
ahead,
years.
mention it quickly.
Yeah, it was really quickly. He was in the Army for 7 years and he suffers from PTSD, and he turned to psychedelic therapy. And he said it saved it. He used ketamine, it saved his life. And he says he, used mushrooms like responsibly. And he told me, he said, I really believe that if we use this and we approach this responsibly, that stuff like psilocybin, for example, could be considered the antibiotic for our brains. And I think he's right about that. So like, I don't know if it should be a matter of like, should we be moving away from psychedelics? I don't see why necessarily we would need to move away from them if we can find that, if taken in small doses, or, kind of like you don't want to eat too much salt or too much meat. You want to have a balanced diet. If this could be something that's included in our diet, we realize that maybe too many psilocybin mushrooms aren't necessarily good for you, but a little bit of them are, it would just be considered a part of cleaning up our brain. So I don't think all psychedelics necessarily can be treated equally either. Just like we have different fats. So I think there's more research that needs to go into it so we kind of understand them better. But I don't see necessarily that it's a necessity that we have to move away from them because we can also achieve it through meditation. I don't see why the two can't necessarily coexist. I guess that's what I'm saying.
All right. Thank you for that. Well, Nathan, Rick, thanks again. Everyone else watching, I appreciate it. Again, I will upload a much cleaner version, meaning that the video and audio is going to be in sync, but you'll be able to rewatch this whole thing again if you're interested to hear the silliness and journeys we've been on. So again, thank you all very much for watching. I thank Nathan for being in the studio and very first guest in the studio. Rick, I'm sorry you couldn't have been here with us in person, but I'm glad you were able to join on Telegram. So, yeah, we'll basically next week I'll be back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. To do open lines. After that, I think I already have a guest scheduled, but I won't mention it until next week. So, again, everyone, thanks very much. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next time.